So welcome to Bridging Evidence and Experience. This is all about making the engineering system a more diversity-friendly place, and it stems from an idea that we had as the Engineers of Tomorrow team, that there is tons of evidence and information and research findings out there that are telling us what the best practices are for encouraging diversity and inclusion in engineering and in the world in general, and we can benefit by applying those insights. So the goal of tonight's webinar is, I guess, to do some reflection in general on obviously what is a very big topic, diversity in engineering, review some insights available from the research. So we're sort of going back to first principles here and asking, what does the research say? What do the experts in this field say is the right way to go? And then maybe process a little bit how this affects our thinking about our own experiences. I think it's important when we do this type of thinking, not just to think with our heads about the ideas and intellectually talk about a term like stereotype threat, for example, but to really feel it and allow ourselves to go into the emotion of what these experiences might have meant to us personally. It's one thing to discuss something in theory, and it's quite another to experience it in your body. And as we do normally with Engineers Without Borders, we really practice whole person systems change leadership and being willing to reflect, being willing to be vulnerable, and being willing to be aware of ourselves and the biases that we bring is going to make us stronger change leaders. So we're going to sort of lean into that emotional piece as well as the information. So hope you're ready for that. At the end, it is all going to sort of come to a head. We're not just going to leave you hanging. I'll warn you that there is, some of the content here, I sometimes get a little depressed when I think about all of the effects and the way that these biases work and the way that diversity has not succeeded so far. But the good news is, ultimately, we can do something about it. And that's what we're going to focus on in the last portion, is to give you some tangible ideas, a call to action, and hopefully lots of inspiration and hope and positive momentum to take it forward. So that's what we're going to go through today. First of all, this is me. I'm Erica. I'm the second one in from the left here. I lead a team called Engineers of Tomorrow. We do strategic engineering outreach to youth and the general public, and we think that with doing the right types of outreach, we can shift the public perception of engineering, we can shift the ideas that young people have about engineering, and by doing that, in the long run, we can change the engineering profession, which in turn changes the world. So this is a sort of a long bet, but we believe a very powerful one, as when we tell better stories and we shift the culture of the engineering profession and the engineering system in general, we are sort of touching on very powerful levers for change. So I am lucky enough to lead an amazing team of people. You'll recognize Shivangana from the EWB University of Waterloo chapter. We had Jonathan join us last summer as well from Quebec. Vanessa is back with us again this summer. She's a Mac engineering grad. Unfortunately, Jonathan, we don't have your picture on here. Jonathan Lazo, our most recent co-op student who joined us for the winter term of 2017, did a fantastic job with contributions to National Engineering Month as well as other EOT project-based work. And we have a bevy of wise and savvy advisors as evidenced by these folks at the bottom here. So you're welcome to check us out online, eot.ewb.ca, if you want to learn more about what we do and who we are, and you're certainly welcome to get in touch with me if that's something that interests you. So again, just another heads up here that Engineers of Tomorrow, you'll see us down here, we're one of several different programs, components that are happening within what we call the evolving engineering space. So the Engineers Without Borders Canada community is very large, consists of the office, the staff core team, and then a number of programs and groups and chapters across Canada, 41 chapters at last count, I believe, and each of them have different activities that they do, as you know, as members of the chapter. So Evolving Engineering has 4 parts at this point. One of them is around establishing a global engineering certificate that really challenges the way that engineering concepts are taught and encourages universities to put them into more of a global and social context, and offers very tangible intervention in the case of the Global Engineering Certificate, which several universities have implemented now, and they've got, I think, a handful of graduates that have gone through the certificate and earned it. So it is an actual educational intervention, which is pretty cool. So there's a collaboration with universities with the Global Engineering Initiative, or GEI. There's us. We count on volunteers to do everything that we do. So that's EOT, Engineers of Tomorrow. There's a social lab, which is a group of 40 people, 40 organizations rather, representing a cross-section of the engineering profession from across Canada, convening regularly to go through a collaborative process to brainstorm on ways to intervene in the system to unlock the higher potential of the engineering profession. And then there's the Pivot Fellowship, which is something related to engineering workplaces and helping them get better using the employees as change agents, or activating them as change agents rather. So all of these components work together in their respective fields, and we just wanted to point out that we have brother and sister initiatives alongside us, that we're not alone in this wish and goal to change the engineering profession. So I believe, this is sort of a multi-layered statement here, that the impact that I can have as an individual, that my organization, Engineers of Tomorrow, has, really filters through to the world that we want to see on a larger scale. And so this is something, I guess, I just put it in here for food for thought, to say that something small, something personal, a commitment that we make, something that we try to enact in our own lives might seem like a small change, but when we do it together, what's that cliche about snowflakes? We might be tiny, but when we add up together, we can cause a snowstorm or something like that. So all of those small changes, those small reflective personal things, add up to the change that we want to see. And it's really exciting, and I found, just the process of writing this very rewarding, to think about how that's all aligned and how it all works together. So just a bit more about the change that we want to see, and the reason that I think it's so important to do this type of strategic outreach is that we're missing out on some great would-be engineers. And I know because I'm friends with one of them. So this woman on the right-hand side here is a friend of mine, and her father is an engineer, and he told her when she was at an impressionable age, sort of a young teenager, that her physics mark wasn't high enough, so she shouldn't go into engineering. Meanwhile, she is such a dynamic, very intelligent, very capable person, and her contributions to the engineering profession could have been stellar. Instead, she ended up getting a biology degree and an MBA, and she ended up doing some overseas work, and she works for a bank now, and she's just, very successful, very talented, and, there's nothing wrong with people not choosing engineering. But my theory is that if we had told a better story to her, if she had received a more encouraging message, despite her physics mark, which was actually in the 80s, it was the same mark that I had in OAC, or grade 13 as it was at the time. And I, of course, went on to become an engineer. So this is a bit close to my heart in terms of the stories that we tell and the messages that we give young people, especially young women who are very susceptible, I think, to those messages of not being able to do something, not being capable, not welcome. We're missing out. And so to bring those folks along and to give them good information that says, look, you're welcome, you're included, you're wanted in the profession if you want to join, if you want to come along and solve big problems and join us in the engineering space, that's really, really important and could be very impactful. So just a little bit more about EOT, I guess, before we dive into the meat of the presentation. This used to be called Global Engineering Outreach, and we rebranded a couple of years ago now, I think it was 2013 or 14, to sort of put the emphasis where we think it belongs, which is on those young people that are, they're in grade 5, 6, 7 today, they're texting their friends, they're Snapchatting, or running around playing ringette or whatever it is that the young people are doing these days. But one day they are going to be innovating and solving important problems and making decisions that are going to affect our society. And so we think it's important to reach out to them and make sure that the engineering profession has that diverse and inclusive element to it, along with the benefits of diversity, which we really think ability to learn from failure, innovation. We know we spark bigger and better ideas when we have more innovative, more diverse folks around the table, rather, not just everyone thinking the same. And in order to crack those really important problems, those grand challenges of the 21st century, things like climate change, things like cybersecurity, things like affordable housing, these solutions have engineering components in them, but they also have social components. They have creative components. They have other things that people need to think about. So first of all, engineers need to be great at collaborating with non-engineers, and we also need to, I think, open up our minds a little bit beyond just calculating things or thinking purely technically about what engineering is and what an engineer needs to be good at. So one way to influence that, as I mentioned, is to do some great engineering outreach, basically telling better stories and sending better messages to the young people of today so that they get better information about what engineering is about. They're not feeding into stereotypes, and they're not making assumptions about themselves that could be incorrect, namely that they can't do it or that they don't belong, when in fact we feel that they can, especially if they want to and they put the effort forward. Okay, so I think, so we manage the National Engineering Month campaign, as I might have mentioned. We do an engineer in residence program, which is professional engineers going into the classroom and talking to kids about engineering. And we also collaborate with EWB chapters and other important actors. So we're all about systemic change, and as I mentioned, you can read more about us on our website. So this is the meat of the presentation. Here we go. So this fellow here, his name is Steve Spencer, and he is a social psychologist, and he used to be based at the University of Waterloo. He has since moved on to a university in the States, but he still maintains ties with the University of Waterloo and the Self-Stereotyping and Societal Norms Lab that he founded. So for those of you watching this video or this presentation that are at the University of Waterloo, this is kind of a cool coincidence that some of these amazing strategies that were specifically, these studies were designed on STEM, specifically engineering students, women in engineering students specifically, really have broken new ground and have sort of advanced the field. So it's really cool that we can sort of harvest that knowledge right from within the University of Waterloo and apply it right away. So again, our theory here is that there's excellent information with people like Dr. Spencer that isn't necessarily coming through to the front lines of an engineering classroom or a presentation to kids about engineering, or even an engineering workplace. I mean, I think we need to also think about making our workplaces a friendlier place for everyone who's going to graduate with an engineering degree and move forward into, industry, into society in general, with their engineering identity and confidence intact. So we need to credit Dr. Spencer as well as his grad student, Crystal Tse, who helped us with this presentation initially. So I want to say off the top that diversity can be a really tricky subject, and this is my personal theory about why maybe we haven't gotten further than we have. I think some people, if they haven't experienced the problem themselves, if they're a member of a group that is not considered a diversity group, that is in the majority, they may say something like, well, maybe there's no problem, or maybe it's better than it used to be. So sort of denying or minimizing the problem, dismissing it, or maybe even getting defensive, saying, well, I'm not racist or sexist, and then going on to explain why, or just going into more of a kind of a helplessness or a despair kind of place of like, we're not getting anywhere, maybe it's useless, maybe we should just give up, like maybe all of these obstacles and the lack of progress that we've made is just proof that we shouldn't be doing this. I think I disagree with that attitude, for the record, but I think that is sometimes, even subconsciously, something that floats around in our heads. And I think it's important to name that and to say, this is a tough thing. If it was easy, we would have fixed it by now. It hasn't been solved. And even the proponents, I think, even, sometimes on their best days or definitely on their worst days, experience that fatigue and that emotional wear and tear. And And so maybe, saying there's no problem or, oh, it's better than it used to be, those can be defense mechanisms. Ultimately, we're trying to arm ourselves against this feeling of, ultimately, this isn't fair, and we're not being inclusive, and we're not succeeding at having representation, for example, within the engineering profession that reflects our society. We're not there yet. And so rather than face up to that and feel the emotion of that and the injustice of that, I think sometimes it's normal to go into these other sort of messages to distract ourselves by saying, oh, maybe it's not so bad, or going into making it about us. Well, I'm not racist or sexist. Well, good for you, but that's only part of the story. None of us lives in a vacuum. None of us, I don't think, can claim to be completely without influence from this world that we live in, and these insights that are sloshing around. So again, this brings us back to what can we do besides get helpless and feel bad about this or pretend it's not happening. We can dig into the insights and focus on the problems, focus on the facts about how it can work better. We can be really honest with ourselves about how we're feeling, and that's how we designed this session, was to help us dig deeper, to process some of that emotion along with the insight. So I want to open up the floor a little bit, and you're welcome to put your answers into the chat box for those of you that are here with us live, or you can take yourself off mute and say a few words. A couple of things here. So if you've been part of efforts to improve diversity in engineering, have they been successful, first of all, and how do you know? Just maybe a couple words there. Or an alternate prompt for you to answer. You can pick one. How do you feel about the lack of diversity in engineering? How does it affect you personally? What does it mean to you? How do you interpret what this says about the world? Or have you thought about it? Maybe you can take a moment to ponder that a little. So this is just kind of to get us situated and to also give me a sense of where you're at and how I can sort of pitch the rest of the presentation to serve what you're looking for. Yeah, go for it, John.
I'd like to answer the how I feel about the lack of diversity in engineering question. I know for me personally, I would never thought about getting into engineering until a teacher suggested it for me. I don't really have any professionals in my family that have gone to university or graduated or anything like that. So I never really had that sort of role model in my life. And even during the first year of when I got into my program, I was sort of questioning whether I should be there. And I didn't see any other faces like me or many people like me. I'm a mature student, so it's kind of hard to also find people like me at the same time, in all honesty. But at the same time, I was sort of doubting my own abilities, and I sort of had to go on a little journey and realize that although I may not see faces like me around me, there are engineers from my ethnic group, from my parts of the world, and I sort of had to open my mind to that possibility that I could be part of the change myself, and I had to realize that, and that's sort of, I guess, how that leads into how I feel about the diversity. I feel that if I could be a positive role model, that might inspire more people. I know role modeling is a huge deal for me. Like, if I never had someone to look up to for certain things, and I might doubt myself. So that's sort of where that self-stereotyping came in. I never really saw any Latino engineers myself. So I guess once I started looking, then I realized it's like, hey, it's sort of a obstacle that I'm making for myself. And if I can overcome that, then maybe I can inspire someone else. So I feel like the lack of diversity, if we eliminate it, then we could inspire more diversity within the profession.
Great. Thanks for that, John. I really agree that, what's the proverb? You light a small candle rather than curse the darkness. You can be the change, and it is just as simple as you standing up and saying, yeah, I'm an engineering student and I'm going to be an engineer. And even if you feel like you don't have everything figured out yet, you're still a role model. You already can inspire others, and I think you probably already have, knowing you as I do. And that's great that you're feeling sort of positive and empowered about that and recognizing that impact. I think, as I said, that positive emotional energy is such an important asset for us as change leaders. We need to really practice our self-care, practice our positive mindset to keep that up, because otherwise we're just going to end up feeling the sorrow and feeling stress and burning out or coping in other ways that might not serve us as well as they could. Okay, great. Does anyone else on the call have something to share at this point? Yep, go ahead, Simon.
I think building on top of what Jonathan's been saying is that we've, like, as individuals involved in organizations such as Engineers Without Borders or Engineers of Tomorrow, like, as current engineering students, we have that kind of positive energy, and like, we're very like eager to share our experiences and try and communicate a better, like, I guess, impression of engineering to younger generations that might be wondering what engineering is all about. But for myself, at this point in time, I think what I feel the most trouble with is actually being able to articulate this energy properly to my audiences when I'm trying to, I guess, facilitate engineering outreach and in turn to improve diversity in engineering in the future cohorts to come.
Perfect. Well, that's great, because that's exactly where we're going to go next. We're going to give you some really tangible strategies and messages and examples and talking points that you can weave into what you're saying and, you know, unpack them, whether you're doing this with, say, a group of young people, say, 7 or 8 year olds, you know, you'd adapt it in a certain way and talk about it in a certain way, or if you're talking to fellow students, maybe first or second years, you can unpack it in a different way. So that's great, and I think that that's a really great opportunity for you to practice your leadership skills, your communication, your mentorship. That's a skill, you know, you build that, and that'll serve you all the way through your career and your lifetime. So that's awesome to hear that you're feeling empowered and inspired and ready to take some tools and put them into action.
Sounds good.
Great segue. Okay, is there anyone else that would like to share? Okay, so thank you for that, and if you're watching the replay, you're welcome to pause and chat as much as you want. The video will be right here when you're finished. So this, I guess, is the point where I give up my my gratitude again. So this is one of Dr. Spencer's grad students, Dr. Crystal Tse, and again, she is a researcher at the University of Waterloo. She has her doctorate in social psychology, and she's most interested in evidence-based interventions to address different social issues. So to translate that a little bit, she wants to intervene in systems using evidence-based insights. So what is the research telling us, and how can we design solutions to address different social issues? And specifically, we're talking about the representation of women and minorities in fields where they are underrepresented. So that's very general, but in this presentation, we're going to speak mostly about engineering and STEM. So just a note about diversity, I think it's very important. You know, Engineers of Tomorrow certainly, and I personally have a real commitment to intersectionality in our work. And so when we speak about diversity, we're not just talking about, for example, white women or just about one particular ethnic group. We're really referring holistically to any group that has traditionally been underrepresented, and that could be related to sexual orientation or even socioeconomic diversity, place of origin, gender, race, ethnicity, some of those more familiar diversity groups that we refer to, that shorthand. And something else that we want to point out here, not to trivialize the issues of those other groups, but we also are interested in looking at people who think differently, people who have had different life experiences. So I don't know how many of you might have had some experience with a profiling tool such as the Myers-Briggs type indicator, you know, introvert versus extrovert. Really, when we think about the value proposition of diversity, the reason that it's worth doing is because we want to have different perspectives at the table. And so by definition, we need a diversity of diversities in order to make this happen. So anytime maybe we refer to women or we refer to Black students, for example, or, you know, to Aboriginal populations, even though they're not referred to in this research, we do believe that each of those groups has its own challenges and its own unique features about those communities and their own stories. However, we do believe that many of these interventions will benefit all of those diversity groups, because we're sort of raising the bar on diversity and inclusion in general. So you'll see what I mean as I go along, and I definitely welcome your feedback and questions on that. So that's just a note of when, for the purposes of this presentation, it would take quite a while to refer to all of those groups and all of those types of diversities each time, but please know that we are very committed to that holistic definition of diversity. So, the big picture is to say that we really believe engineering and technology professions in general, and I think we could apply this at the education level as well, engineering schools, will be better off if they have a more diverse perspective and makeup. So we're going to be able to solve more complex problems because you get a better range, a better resonance of inputs, experiences, and skills, and we're going to be better able to serve society when we reflect that society. So, for example, I've spoken to a couple of tech companies whose customer base are largely women, and they are interested in having more female staff and female programmers to work for them, because they know that they're going to resonate well with those customers and they'll be able to serve them well. So it is also pragmatic. It's not just about doing the right thing or sort of a social justice or fairness argument, although that is a pretty good reason, we think. There's also really there's a more pragmatic value add as well. There's some pretty good research from Engineers Canada about the fact that when you have more diversity in your engineering company, you will have better results. More diversity in boards of corporations shows that they have higher profits. So we might have some mixed feelings about saying, well, diversity is a profit machine, and isn't that just sort of feeding into a system that maybe we want to change and open up and make more inclusive and more principled in general, not just based on profit. However, that's one lever we have access to. It's one path for change. So I think it's important to say that. Equality and access to opportunities as fairness and justice, as well as an imperative for engineering. So pragmatic as well as the more sort of idealistic or fairness claim is important. There's a fantastic TED Talk. I'm sure there are many good ones about diversity. One of my favorites is by a woman in the States called Verna Myers, and she speaks very passionately about some of the violence that young black men or any black men, I guess, are subject to in the United States. It's a very passionate and moving talk, and a really neat idea that she poses is it's not even just about diversity. We want to go further than that. We don't just want to have representation or sort of people at the table sort of, okay, check the box, they're here. It's actually about valuing those people and including them and getting them engaged and getting the best of their ideas and having that learning occur in the team. So it's about inclusiveness as well. Not just about being invited to the party, but about actually being asked to dance. So this to me seems really obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway. We know we want to attract and retain diversity, having established that that is a valuable thing to do. How do we do it? Well, as any good engineers would, any good problem solvers, we look to the evidence, we look to the science, and engineers don't have a whole lot to say about diversity, to be honest. It's not one of those engineering science things. It is more in the realm of social psychology and humanities. So we want to put into practice what has been discovered in that research, and that's the same way that we put into practice laws of the natural world when we do engineering or practice engineering technology. So I'm going to switch now into paraphrasing largely and summarizing some of the research insights that are available. And I'm not an expert in these research items, but there is available in this presentation and in the slides. You can click on the research studies and it'll take you to the original article. If there's something that isn't quite sitting well in my explanation, I encourage you to dig deeper and look at it. So if I'm not doing justice to the complete I guess, insight available, please know that you can find that yourself and you can keep going. However, we did go over this with Dr. Tse, and she was able to give us a very good read from her perspective of what the key points were, and all of these slides were designed by her and are a good capture of the information. So to sum up the concept that we're about to unpack here, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. So what we're getting at here is the importance of mindset, and the way that if you think you can do something, that actually will influence the outcome. And we're going to unpack a little bit the mechanism by which that happens. So this is some data from the United States that shows a gap in reading achievement between white and black students. So this is historical, obviously dating back. It's quite consistent, and it's shows a difference that's statistically significant between the reading scores of white kids versus the black kids. Here we can see that the percentages of women in these STEM, if you will, or engineering environments and occupations are very low. You know, we're 50% of the population or the total workforce, just under 50%. Yet when we start to look at the physical sciences, computer, technical occupations, and engineers, engineering is actually one of the worst. It's just, I believe it's just over 10% nationally. Quick glance at a group of engineering students. You can see the gender ratio there. It's not 50-50. And this is going back a few years to the University of Waterloo's percentage of women in these various engineering disciplines. A few bright spots here. Interestingly enough, architecture is quite close to that parity mark. It's actually over 50%. Environmental engineering is pretty close to representation. We would call 50-50 equal representation, reflective of the larger population. Systems design and management are not too shabby either, but these other sort of more traditional engineering disciplines are lagging behind. Unfortunately, this is not news to anyone. So what are some possible explanations for this? As human beings, we're always trying to tell ourselves a story about why things are happening. And there are some people who, as incorrect as it might be, will say, well, it's just due to innate differences. Those people just aren't as good at that type of thing. Their brains aren't wired the right way, so of course they're not performing well. Or they don't work hard enough. They're not motivated, which if you're anything like me, that idea sort of makes your blood boil a little bit, to imply that women aren't showing up in engineering, or black students aren't reading as well as white students because they're not working hard enough. Again, I don't know that we can really say that. More and more, the research, though, and the research I'm about to show you, is focused on situational factors. And these are things that are obviously beyond the individual's control. The things, their socioeconomic status, where the parents and teachers influence them and come in, where the media plants ideas in their head and maybe kind of essentially throws them off their game just enough to underperform, that they're performing below their potential because of these other situational factors. And interestingly enough, even aspects of the testing situation itself. So if you picture one of those kids taking a math test, something about that test itself could be the reason, not their innate ability or their motivation could be an explanation. So these are all just important things to consider. And so I invite you to sort of explore that a little as we look at these pieces of evidence. So this is our first study that we're going to look at, and it experimented with giving people, specifically women that were invited to do a spatial task, the opportunity to play a 3D video game, such as the one you see here. It looks a bit violent, but definitely good for sharpening up that spatial awareness, and then inviting them to do this mental rotation task. So I don't know about you, but I had to do this in my first year mech class, to be able to take this shape and say, okay, which one of these is this one rotated? There's a specific part of your brain that lights up, and you can either, they sort of say, well, either you can do it or you can't. Actually, what this particular study found is that when women were given an opportunity to play a video game, they could come back to this test and do much better at it. And they theorized that this was due to sort of the spatial awareness being woken up by playing this 3D video game. And not only was the effect significant, that is, it showed up in their measurement, but it lasted and it was repeatable 6 months later. It was a lasting effect. So interesting to challenge this idea, the stereotype, that negative voice that says, oh, well, women are just not smart enough to do that. Actually, you can show that with this intervention, they are able to do it. So how cool is that? That's really actually, I think, really interesting, even more interesting than this innate gap idea. And so this brings us to the idea of stereotypes. And we have lots of ideas about what people can do, what old people are capable of, what nerdy people are capable of, white people and dancing, girls and math. We've got this example here that's actually kind of an interesting little commentary. These two stick figures of indeterminate gender, while you suck at math, you personally, because you got that particular thing wrong. And this person, who I guess is a girl because she's got hair, is, it's girls suck at math as soon as she makes a mistake. So notice how that generalization kicks in, and really, how fair is that? How much evidence is there to back up the fact that that stereotype is really true, or is it maybe just due to these other factors? So what are we telling our young people when these are the types of messages that are available for young women? I'm too pretty to do homework. My brother has to do it for me. Oh my goodness. I'm good at shopping, music, dancing, not so much the math. Well, okay, so this is fine to a certain extent, if not admitting that not everyone is good at everything is kind of an empowering message, I guess. But the implication here, and it's pretty consistent when you look at this collection of fashion artifacts here, we're telling young girls who they're supposed to be, even if it's very subtle, and even if it's not sort of said out loud by someone who's important. Young women, I think girls especially at that age, they're sort of vulnerable to those messages. They can take that on. Add up the pinkification of everything here. So Lego used to be, building stuff and building spaceships and making houses and things, and now it's, these friends sitting around in a cafe, and things are pink, and that denotes a certain quality of these girls are supposed to be friendly and nurturing and sort of silly and not really interested in problem solving. So this is, again, a stereotype, and just being around it can really affect, it can be enough to trip up the brain circuitry in a young woman as she's doing a test, for example, if she's aware she's not supposed to be good at this, or maybe she doesn't really want to be good at this because she wants to be popular or pretty like Barbie. So here's Barbie saying math class is tough. What kind of role model is that, honestly? So Mattel had to pull this math class is tough Barbie. It actually isn't around anymore. But again, just to build on these examples, you Google engineer, white guys in hard hats. How representative is that? Not very helpful. So this brings us to the concept of stereotype threat. So just imagine with me for a moment that you're in a classroom or a lecture hall and you're giving a presentation. And all your classmates and coworkers are watching you. This is something that you're really you're excited about. You've prepared for months, and you know this material, and the stakes are really high. You want to wow everybody and blow them away. But you start to stumble over a word or two, and you pause, and you feel sort of embarrassed, and you become aware that maybe you're not supposed to be good at this. Maybe you're not supposed to succeed at this presentation. And you realize that they're kind of looking down on you. Maybe they're laughing at you. Oh my goodness, maybe they think that I'm a joke and I'm not supposed to be here. and all of a sudden that talk inside your head has derailed you and distracted you from what you are capable of doing. You're prepared, your innate ability is there. It's sitting there ready to be tapped into. But because you've got this tape playing in your head, this awareness that you have that maybe you're not supposed to do well or that someone is laughing at you or not doing well, that is what stereotype threat is. It is an expectation of not doing well that you are aware of. You are aware that other people have this expectation, and so you end up getting thrown off your game just long enough, you stumble, and then all of a sudden you're reinforcing like, oh wow, they're right. I'm really not good at this. So interesting. If we can be aware of that negative stereotype, there's pressure, and often we just buckle under that pressure. We underperform and we withdraw. What if, though, we could back up to the beginning and we could say, there is a negative stereotype here, and I'm aware of this thing called stereotype threat, and I know that it can threaten my performance if I let it. However, I'm going to intervene here, and I'm going to take this pressure that I feel and redirect it. I'm going to use it in a different way. And that sounds a little simplistic, but that's basically what some of these strategies will allow us to do. So there was another piece of evidence here, and this one was actually done by Dr. Spencer's group. And they had male and female participants doing a math test. And they told the first group that this test shows gender differences. They said, we really see differences in how the two genders score. And then they had an alternate group that they said this test shows no gender differences. So they had these two groups, the high stereotype threat group, the ones that were told, yeah, this test definitely has a gendered, girls tend to do badly on it, basically, is what they were saying to the people before they took the test. And then they had another group where they said, basically everybody does equally well on this. And then the outcome that they looked at was how well people scored. So what do you think? In the high stereotype threat group, these are the people who were told to expect a difference. The men did well and the women did not very well. In the group where they were told that there were no gender differences, the men and the women performed almost exactly the same. So what does this say about the difference between, first of all, you look at the two red boxes, the difference in how the women performed, pretty amazing boost when women get that sort of inadvertent boost of confidence by saying, nope, this test, everybody does equally as well on this. Sure enough, that turned out to be the case. And it's that self-fulfilling prophecy, as I was saying. And interestingly enough, the men actually did better on the one where they were told they were going to do better. So again, it's that if you think you can and you think you will, you're going to do better. And they did a little, I don't know if this is statistically significant, but there is a little bit of a lower level of performance in the male group in the non-gender, the no gender difference messaged test group. So I think that this is really interesting, especially for the men to consider. Are you willing to give up that edge that you had to live in a world where we want everybody to succeed? This stereotyped group, this could be women, it could be a different type of stereotyped group as well. And this group of men here, this could be a non-stereotyped group of people. Are you willing to give up the idea that you are better in order to help everyone succeed? Is that something that your ego can handle? And I think that that's a really personal question, and that's really at the heart of what we're trying to do here, because some of that will show up as resistance, because I think some people are a little bit addicted to that edge, even if they don't really approve or think of themselves as someone who subscribes to a theory of being better. They might not want to let go of it. So I think that's just an interesting element there. So the consequences of stereotype threat, again, here's another study that says it undermines performance. So there's a study that captured that. There's another study that said it triggers concerns about belonging. And boy, especially a first and second year engineering student, I can really identify with this one. When I was a student, I wondered all the time, am I even supposed to be here? I feel really dumb. I don't know, how everyone else is getting through this. I'm not sure I'm supposed to be here. I'm not sure I belong. I'm not sure I can do this. Somehow I did make it through. I did end up graduating, and I went on to practice engineering, and I gained my confidence back somehow. I sort of feel like I deeply understand these effects, and I managed to persevere myself. So I think that's a really a hopeful sign that it can be done. There are many women who have done it, and I think we all wish that it will be easier for the women and other stereotyped groups that come after us, that it won't be as hard. Again, more bad news here. Stereotype threat, it lowers engagement and retention and threatens health even. So this is serious stuff here. This is not just a little just a little shadow wandering through your mind that goes away. This can have serious consequences. And it's all been documented. It's been found in these studies. So one analogy to help us unpack the meaning of stereotype threat a little more is to consider a runner wearing ankle weights. Okay? So they're going to run, let's say they're running the 100-meter dash, and obviously ankle weights are not optimal, but they run anyway. And they run against someone who is not wearing ankle weights. So the race finishes, and the two runners, the one with ankle weights and the one without ankle weights, is an absolute tie. They finish just exactly at the same time. So wow, that's pretty good. That's pretty impressive. If we were to remove those ankle weights, who do you think would do better? If we did a rematch, who do you think would win? So there is a theory that says that probably if you remove the ankle weights, that person is going to do better. Yeah, exactly. I see the answers coming through on the chat. Now, in this metaphor, in this case, the ankle weights are stereotype threat. So the person who's running with those weights is someone who is aware of a stereotype against their group, and they're running anyway. They're giving it all they have. And, in this case, the ankle weights can either make you stronger or they could injure you. I think it could go either way, depending on a lot of different factors. But when they remove those ankle weights, they actually perform, in this study, Walton and Spencer, they removed the stereotype condition, and those stereotype students in the safe condition performed better. So here they were running at this level, even at these different levels of performance. So these are 3 different groups of students. They all, when you group them and compare them to the non-stereotype students, under threat, they perform worse. But when you remove their ankle weights, they perform better than the non-stereotyped students. So how interesting is that? So this is where I'd like to open up for discussion. You may be having some aha moments at this point. You may be feeling some feelings about what happened. Maybe this has happened to you. I know I had that feeling of like, wow, I definitely experienced this, my entire engineering education. And if this happened to you personally, I welcome, a little bit of a story about that. If you have a sense of when it happened and what happened and how you're recognizing that now in this moment, or how do you feel about these systemic efforts, these systemic factors that are holding back our efforts to make engineering more inclusive? Is there any part of you that's maybe resisting this? And I'd like to say that this is a safe space. I mentioned at the top this is emotional, and that there's maybe some stuff lurking in our subconscious that we might not be aware of until we start to ask ourselves questions like these. So if you'd like to answer either, whether you are looking at this more as someone who identifies with the stereotype threatened population, or a non-stereotype threat population, whichever one you identify, do you have something you want to share at this point? And the people who are watching the recording, put it on pause. Okay, so I think I sort of shared that I definitely felt that I I felt this. I don't know if there was one moment that I could pinpoint, but just a general sense of you shouldn't be here was sort of what I picked up on from my engineering professors. And some of them were great, but I remember the ones that weren't, and that was sort of what I took on. And I think when I found out about stereotype threat, I felt a weird combination of relieved and angry because I felt very validated that, oh, that's why I felt that lack of confidence. That's why I questioned whether I belonged. Even though, in the intervening years since I've graduated, the decade and a half that I've been doing engineering type stuff, I am more convinced than ever that I am a good fit for engineering. And so any doubts that I had in retrospect were they were just that. They were doubts, they were fear, they were incorrect messages coming to me. And so that was I also felt, I think, a little sad for the time and energy I had wasted in doubting myself when maybe I could have been actually doing something, accomplishing something with that energy. So anyway, that is for you to discuss and think about whether you're identifying from the stereotyped side, someone who's experienced that themselves or might be realizing that you've experienced that, or people who maybe haven't been stereotyped and maybe think that this is all sounding a little bit sinister or unfair against the majority in itself. I definitely had some of that feedback the first time I presented this. So basically, stereotype threat is a thing. It's a bad thing. It's very pervasive, and it has potential to do real damage to people's mental health, physical health, and their ability to succeed and feel good about themselves in the world. So despite these powerful obstacles, how can we be part of a solution? That's really what we're coming to now. So fortunately, there's a study that suggests a term WISE to describe the social psychological interventions. Now, what is a social psychological intervention? Really, it could be anything from a program, it could be a book, it could be a message, it could be a single sentence, it could be a single idea that you're planting in someone's brain. And especially if you are a trusted person, if you are a role model, if you are sitting in front of someone as their mentor or as an outreach leader or as a representative of something that they aspire to be, you can have quite an impact. So what do you need to know in order to do these social psychological interventions correctly? They need to be precise. You need to get the wording right. They need to be subtle. You can't just say, hey, you really shouldn't doubt yourself, because you probably can do this really well. That is not going to get in there in the way that it needs to. It needs to be brief, apparently. You can't ramble on, and self-generated, relatable to the person that you're trying to reach, whether that's a peer, a student, could be a child, something that they can really relate to, and even better if you can get them to fill in the blanks, so to speak. So you're not talking at them or to them or filling them up with information. You're talking with them, and you're getting them to share something about themselves that you can then take them along with. And ideally, it sets off a recursive process, meaning that you have that one conversation with them, or you give that one presentation or have that interaction with them, and it lasts. It continues. The effect of your that insight, that message that you leave them, sets off something in them that then perpetuates a positive loop for them. So they get the message and they tell that message over and over again. So we've labeled these interventions for a K-12 audience, but you can see how they might apply beyond that as well. So role models and mentors. This is, I think, a fairly well understood effect. Mentoring opportunities do happen naturally whenever you can put a minority person or a stereotyped person, that could be a female or a different type of minority leader and facilitator in front of people. So again, when you're organizing a workshop or when perhaps you're having a conversation, letting those people speak, let them lead, let them address the participants. Don't say why. Now we're going to let the women speak. No, just let that happen. Leave space for that, because that will speak volumes in itself. And maybe, we put this in here for people who maybe don't have an obvious diverse allegiance. You can speak about a time that you were on the outs, that you're specific. Maybe you have a neurodiversity, or you have a time that you went overseas and you were not a part of the majority group. When you can relate to that, you can relate in that way as well. If it so happens that, let's say, you have a group of white males was teaching or giving a presentation, you can still tap into that same idea of diversity. So here's another thing. Girly role models can backfire. And what we mean by this is, if you're trying to go out of your way to say, hey girls, look at this, there's a computer engineer Barbie. I guess this is one step up from the math is hard Barbie, but there is a computer engineer Barbie. Or IBM came up with a campaign for girls called Hack a Hairdryer, and it was just absolutely skewered on Twitter. Like, you can't believe the contempt that came out for this, because what you're actually doing is you're setting up that girly, you're evoking that girly culture, those stereotypes, those assumptions, that baggage that comes with that, and you're setting off stereotype threat, even though your intention might be the obvious. So they were trying to say to girls, hey, you can hack a hairdryer. Like, you can be a technical, problem-solving, innovating, hands-on professional type person. And hey, it's a hairdryer. Like, that's something you like, right? Because you're a girl. And it was, well-intentioned, obviously, but when you point something out like that, it can really come off as very kind of condescending and just unhelpful. So choosing relatable role models with accomplishments outside of work is the recommendation here. Not accentuating, the specific sort of stereotype things that they do, but looking at, this is someone who maybe sings or gardens or has a partner, or, portraying them as a whole human being, and using examples that aren't gendered. And there are plenty of those out there, even though we do live in this sort of culture that wants to sort everything into pink and blue. I know when I go looking for toys or clothes for my daughter, it's amazing how much pink there is out there, right? But you can escape it. I find blue, I find orange, I find yellow to put on her as well. So we're trying to fight the power in our own small way. But anyway, we had a 12-year-old in one of our sessions recently, and we turned to him and said, like, hey, what are some things that both boys and girls like in your class? And these were some examples that he gave. He said music, movies, the environment, and then we threw in creativity, solving big problems, and helping people. There's so much evidence, and this isn't one of the studies that we're pointing to here, but there's so much evidence to say that we really have so much diversity within the genders and within certain groups, even more than between. Like, we're all interesting, unique mixes of, stereotypically feminine and masculine, if we really let ourselves express ourselves naturally. We don't need to put ourselves and put each other into these boxes and say how we're going to be and what we're going to be. There's really so much more scope for creativity and innovation and doing cool stuff when we allow ourselves to be who we are. So that's my little speech about getting rid of the gender paradigm. So another really great tangible thing that you can do when you're evoking, trying to set a diversity and inclusion friendly environment is to evoke growth mindset. So reconceptualizing intelligence and ability, awesome. So you might have heard of this already. It's quite popular now, Carol Dweck's work, to say it's actually not important. It's not as important, rather, what you know, what you have innately, what you can do or not do. That's really not the whole story. And remember back to the beginning where we were talking about being able to rotate that 3D shape? If you sort of come in there with that attitude of like, oh, either you can do it or you can't, either you've got it or you don't, that sets off that stereotype threat in the mind of someone, for example, a woman who is supposedly not able to do it. They will probably find themselves having trouble doing it because you've brought up the stereotype. However, the antidote to that is to emphasize what it means to persist, to have gradual improvement over time, to work hard at something, not just looking at immediate results or innate ability. And I love this example actually because it means you can fail at something initially and then come back and try again and do better and be better in the long run, and not get attached to that first try that failed, and then you think, okay, it failed, that means I failed, that means I'm a failure, that means I can't do this and I have no business trying again. That is the stereotype spiral, the downward spiral that we want to redirect. So a safer environment when we emphasize the importance of effort and gradual improvement over time as opposed to innate ability. So really simple thing, but you can share your own stories of failure and recovery to model that. Say, hey, I've been where you are, I've struggled, I have failed too, and it's okay. You're going to continue to improve. You're going to continue to grow your brain, grow your skills. If you want to get really fancy, you can talk about neuroplasticity and the ways that we now know that our brain can rewire itself and learn things that weren't initially possible. Being encouraging as far as keep trying, working hard, you'll get it. You can do it. Everyone makes mistakes at the beginning. So this is a really great attitude. This is kind of not specifically directed at the stereotyped students necessarily, or the stereotyped folks that you're talking to, but for everyone. It just creates a safer, friendlier, I think more realistic environment as well, because there really is no you're a failure, you suck, get out of here. That's not a thing. That's just a mindset. That's a lie that we tell ourselves when we're feeling threatened. So when we say, hey, this didn't work out at all and I'm going to do something completely different, that is totally fine. So asking what you can learn when things go well and what are you going to do next time to keep that sense of self-confidence intact, even though things didn't go well in that particular on that particular test or in that particular experiment. Another intervention, keeping high standards and assuring people that they can meet them. If you can show, hey, this is a high standard, but I know that you'll get there. It's about not giving up on the kids who don't get it right away. So if you think about suggesting maybe lowering the bar, changing an activity to make it easier, your heart might be in the right place there. For example, let's say if you're dealing with a group of kids and they're struggling, don't take that away from them. Let them struggle with it. Let them wrestle with it. They're going to be so much prouder when they get there. Show you believe in them and maybe nudge them, encourage them, guide them a little bit along the way, but don't bring that bar down because that's really valuable. Encourage them, but don't change the task and say, I know this is a challenge, but I know you can do it. This is also making me think of some of the work that Brené Brown speaks about. So she did that TED Talk about vulnerability a few years back that was pretty much a sensation. So if you haven't checked that out, Brené Brown, it's like Renee, but with a B at the beginning. And she has some really beautiful words as well about dealing with kids, with young people, and saying, I can't protect you from ever struggling with something. You will struggle. You're going to meet obstacles, but I know you have what it takes. And really being that vote of confidence and being willing, for example, as a parent or as a mentor or as an outreach leader, to let people struggle and be with them in that struggle and say, I know you're frustrated, but you can do this. This is a challenge, but it's going to be worth it, and you're going to come out on the other side, not only with yourself intact, but with this new set of skills and capacity that you never would have had if you hadn't struggled. So really reframing essentially what it means to suck at something and who doesn't need that kind of encouragement and reframing. Showing that you value diversity. This is an awesome one. I think it's so important not to pretend that we don't see those differences. Saying, and I heard this in the workplace when I first started working as an engineer, like, oh, we don't care. We don't even notice that you're a girl. Well, of course you notice. Come on. Like, it's obvious that I have a different gender. I show up differently in the world. I have a lot of differences from a stereotypical engineer, or maybe what you would expect. but that doesn't mean I'm not good. That just means I'm different. So get over it, sort of thing, is what I had to say once I started having a bit more confidence in myself. But being colorblind in the case of ethnic diversity or racial diversity, or gender blind in the case of gender, it actually discourages minorities and women. So be explicit. You don't have to be awkward about it, but you could show diversity in photos, normalizing that representation, and speak honestly and sincerely about encouraging, embracing, and valuing that diversity. Saying we need everyone's contributions. Join us. You're welcome. There is a place for you is actually the slogan of the National Engineering Month campaign, and using inclusive language. So I know myself, I'm in the minority as a woman, but I am in the majority as a straight, able-bodied white woman, cis identified. I am in the minority here, and sometimes I do feel a little awkward to say the right thing, and you may not say the right thing when you're trying to reach out to someone who has that other type of diversity that you don't. But I think it's worth burning through that embarrassment and burning through those missteps to say, don't pretend that those differences don't exist, because that actually just makes it worse. Another one, modeling respect for women and minorities. Who knew? So this is based on a study that was done, actually part of Steve Spencer's group. When the majority group, and that could be men or white people or whoever the majority group is, show respect for women and minorities, the participants perform better. So this was based on a study where they had a female grad student and a male grad student in front of a group of people, and in one group the man was sort of dismissive of the woman grad student. He sort of, rolled his eyes or said something, mildly offensive to sort of indicate that he did not respect the woman, and then they gave the students a test, right? So they did this little skit in front of them, modeling a lack of respect, and then there was another group that had a different interaction modeled between the male and female grad student, where the man spoke respectfully to her, he invited her to speak to the group, and then they gave them the same test. So how do you think that worked out? When the participants had seen respect modeled for the woman, they did better. So have women and minorities speak, listen while they're speaking, let them lead or co-lead with them whenever possible, and show that you're listening. Maybe don't pull out your phone. Maybe don't stare off into space. Maybe watch them and nod your head and model that you are listening to them. It's a very subtle thing, but that could make a big difference. Even going one step further, to ask them for advice or help in front of your audience. That's another preferred intervention that can achieve that same goal. So now we're moving into some interventions that were pioneered on university and college students. So this one's about coping with stress. And I just love this one. I've used it myself, on myself, even though I'm well past graduation. And it has to do with reappraising or reinterpreting, is how I would put it, feelings as a challenge versus a threat. So remember how I had that example at the beginning that said, you're in the lecture hall and you're giving your presentation. You can feel your palms sweating and your heart is starting to beat and your face feels a little flushed. One way to interpret that is to say, wow, I'm so nervous. I really must not be very good at this. No wonder I'm nervous. I suck. And then all of a sudden that negative loop starts going, and all of a sudden you're stumbling over your words and you are actually not doing a very good job at the presentation. So it's become a negative loop there, a self-fulfilling prophecy. But another way to look at that is to say, my palms are sweating. My face is warm. My body is gathering resources to do a good job. I have this, my body knows that this is a big deal and it's responding. It's helping me to do a good job. And this is normal. This is what people's bodies do when there's something going on inside. Our bodies are amazing things. And look at all this energy I have to do this presentation. Isn't it cool that my body is responding to help me handle this challenge, rather than framing it as negative? So if you see the difference there, right? You're saying, I'm having this reaction. Instead of thinking of it as a stress reaction, you can say, there's something really important going on here, and I am responding, I am bringing all of my resources to this challenge, and I'm going to step up and I'm going to do great. You could fill in the blank there with a positive statement instead. And chances are, which way do you think which message is going to produce a better presentation, is going to achieve a better result? Obviously, when you can sort of intervene in that. So talking about overcoming challenges, even if it's hard, you can do it. Take this on as a challenge. And I think there's also something else, depending on the age and the context of your audience. You might want to share this with them. Like, hey, do you know, it's actually normal. Like, everyone gets nervous. That doesn't mean that you're not good at this. It just, you know, it means that your body is responding in a certain way, and you can take that energy and harness it in a positive direction. Similarly, about belonging. So this is kind of that same thing where we have an initial doubt, in this case about whether we belong or not, and then we think, oh boy, I must not belong because I'm thinking I don't belong. Right? So we take that as evidence that we don't belong because we're having that doubt. But that is totally not a thing. That's not the way it works. Our anxiety and concerns are normal. They can be temporary, and they can be overcome. Because what we're really doing when we're saying to ourselves, do I belong, is we're expressing a very basic human need for connection and to know that we are where we're supposed to be. Do I fit in here? Do I have something in common with these people around me? Have I made the right decision? You might as well give yourself a chance to find out what those differences, what those common ground areas, what those positive data points are. So you can encourage someone, you can reassure, normalizing those ideas and saying, like, yeah, I struggled too. It's totally normal. That isn't evidence that you don't belong. That's evidence that you're struggling, you know, and that's what happens to everyone because this matters, because engineering is hard, you know, fill in the blank about why this might be happening. And you can say something like, you know, it's not about you. This is hard for everybody. Don't take, you know, encouraging them not to take it personally and make an attribution about themselves out of the fact that they're struggling. It gets better. Self-affirmation, this is a cool one. So this is based on a study that was done in the States. Some minority students from different ethnic backgrounds were encouraged to reflect on their values, something that is important to them. And after they wrote, you know, a short little paragraph, a few sentences about something that mattered to them, they were given a math test. And what do you know? They did better on that math test than the control group that were not asked to reflect on their values. So this is really cool, I think, because what it says is that when we think about something that's important to us, it improves our opinion of ourselves. And we affirm that we are connected to something, that we matter, that we have purpose. We feel sort of pulled out of our own maybe doubts about ourselves, and we think about something bigger. So I think about the grand challenges of engineering, and I think about some of the problems that I'm particularly passionate about, something like worker safety. My voice gets clearer. I get more focused. I get less nervous, and in my head, I feel more confident in myself because I'm not thinking about me. I'm thinking about those people whose lives need to be protected. That is more important than me being nervous. And so I guess that's an example of a way that I connect to this study personally when I think about reflecting on something that I value and how that works for me. And so this also came out in this study, and it was done with kids, and it worked for them on their tests. So how interesting to encourage someone to think about something that matters most to them and how that can affect their sort of perception of themselves and their affirmation of themselves. Ask them what they're passionate about, which is really perfect for the sort of thinking and talking that we do anyway in EWB. So isn't it cool to know that that is a pro-diversity strategy? And I mentioned the grand challenges for engineering and how we were already doing this when I found out about this intervention. So I was pretty happy that we were inadvertently already putting that particular intervention into practice. So we're wrapping up now. Some take-home messages for outreach leaders or for mentors or for pretty much anyone who is interested in making an impact. Your participants may experience stereotype threat. It's pretty pervasive, to be honest, especially if they're members of certain groups. During your outreach event, during their engineering education, they may feel triggered into that space of, maybe I shouldn't be here, maybe I don't belong, maybe I'm not any good at this, maybe I can't do it. Don't, worry about that. You don't need to rush in and try to talk them out of it. But you can reduce or eliminate it. So it's not your fault that they experience stereotype threat. That stuff is, programmed in by culture and media and many other sources. But you can avoid enforcing those threatening conditions. You can combat that using some of these wise psychological interventions. So I've given you some examples. I really like this here. I can do this. No, I am doing this. And thinking of yourself as strong and believing in yourself, that can really produce that positive recursive effect. So some of the strategies: positive, relatable role models. Set and keep high standards. Don't dumb things down, because that shows that you don't have confidence, and that might make them not have confidence in themselves. Promoting a growth mindset instead of fixed, which comes up all the time. Demonstrate that diversity is valued. Don't pretend that diversity doesn't exist or that it doesn't matter. Model that respect for women and minorities, especially in front of other audiences full of women and minorities. Reframe that stress and anxiety as normal. Provide opportunities for self-affirmation. And if you would like to read more, these are all of the reference materials that you're going to need. And interestingly enough, my team member Becky went to her kids' school and found this bulletin board here. And so this is something that her 11-year-old daughter has in her classroom, and this is, in a nutshell, exactly what we want to be saying here. I can't do this. Instead, I'm going to train my brain in math, and knowing this is a muscle you can develop, that you can do this. It's good enough. Is this really my best? Maybe challenging ourselves to have those high standards. This is too hard. I'll use some of the strategies I've learned. I give up. This may take some time and effort. Like, I don't know about you, but I can feel these messages in my body as just like, oh, that's just better. That's just like, it's more comfortable. It's kinder. It's nicer. I made a mistake. Okay, I made a mistake, but making a mistake helps me improve and I can get better. I don't get it. I don't understand yet. And that word yet is so powerful, because just sticking it on to the end of any, negative sentence or message we might be giving ourselves, it sets up that possibility that it is going to change. And when we believe that it can, many, many things are possible. So we've done a little bit of this WISE strategy through National Engineering Month, and we encourage our organizers, we require them actually to choose some of these messages that they're going to put across in their events, and we have them basically promote diversity. We give them some really specific examples of things that they can do to reinforce this concept of there is a place for you. And then we get feedback, and we look at things like what are the girls saying about this? Did they have a good time? Did they feel engaged? Did they feel empowered, like they came out feeling good about this? And I actually love this response here about, like, this says, what did you learn about engineering and technology today that you didn't know before? And the response was, you fail many times, but then you finally get it right. And I read that and I just thought, yes, there we go. That is the message. That is the experience we want to be creating for people who might consider doing anything in the future, but especially doing engineering, because that is going to really help turn the tide on the effects that we see now around diversity. So again, how do we know it worked? We've got these feedback forms that we collect from the students after they do their engineering activity, and we just really like this. I mean, it's about being creative, helping people, and having fun. Like that sounds like they're going to continue, and they're going to lean in the next time engineering comes up. So final thoughts back to you as diversity leaders, as mentors, and change agents, people who want to make a difference. Your contribution really matters. Your energy level matters. Your ability to contribute to this and to keep yourself feeling like you're able to do something about it. Remember, off the top, we don't want to give in to hopelessness. It is a challenge, and we do have a long way to go as far as achieving equal representation and great inclusion and diversity. But you're not alone, and we're all dealing with our biases. I don't think that finding a bias in our minds makes us a bad person. It doesn't make us a terrible change leader. I think being willing to admit that and deal with it and move forward makes us even stronger and more credible and more human. So thanks for your time today, and I just want to give another thanks to our advisor, Dr. Tse, who shared this work with us, and she prepared these slides originally. There is a version, if you're interested, of this presentation where Dr. Tse goes through all of these studies and gives a different gives her interpretation and her commentary. So that'll be slightly different than what I've shared. And again, you are welcome to read up on any of the strategies, any of the original research, if that's helpful and interesting to you. So again, just a couple invitations. You can sign up for our newsletter on our website. If you're interacting with teachers at all in the K-12 engineering system, maybe encouraging them to check out our Engineering Hat webinar. I can send you information about that if you're interested. And we also have, we're currently, right now it's May, and we are in recruiting mode for the Engineering Residence Program. So if you know any K-12 educators who might welcome an engineering mentor in their classroom, please send them to eir.ca. And here is my email address. Please follow up with me if you have any questions or comments or ideas or success stories or anything at all. We'd love to hear what you think about this presentation and these strategies. So thanks very much for watching.